You are listening to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, Episode 10. This week on the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, we're talking hunting apps, applications you can use on your iPhone or your tablet to help you out in the field. And then we're also going to get into scouting, tell you how to do it and what to look for when you're out on the road trying to plan your next hunt. All right, welcome to the show. This is episode 10 of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. And joining me as always today is my co-host, Dan Harushka. Dan, how are you?
Doing well. We're getting a little bit of cold weather coming in this weekend, so I'm excited about that. Get some new birds down here.
Yeah, cold weather. It's starting to feel like, the time of the year that everyone looks forward to all year. The rut is going to start cranking for all of our archery hunters out there, and starting to see some, big bucks showing up on Facebook and stuff like that. So, definitely an exciting part of the year, and it's an exciting moment for the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, being that this is episode 10 of the show. So it's sort of a little bit of an anniversary for us to kind of celebrate getting in, into our 10th episode.
Yeah, I think it's going pretty well. You posted the iTunes ratings today, and the show seems to be doing pretty well, and it's pretty popular. The popular meter is high, and that just shows that we're bringing a little bit of quality to what people want to hear. So I say let's keep it going.
Yeah, definitely. I'm appreciative of everyone that tunes into the show, and all the feedback and stuff that we've received, as we've said a couple times, is just outstanding. And we're just really thankful that everyone enjoys the show. And if there's anything that we're not covering that you'd like us to, please reach out to us. Let us know where we can improve, and we're certainly willing to make any changes that are necessary to get you guys what you're looking, the information you're looking for. So, which leads us to this week's topics. When we've talked about before in the past how we brainstorm as to what we're going to cover on the show, and it's something that we go back and forth with, and kind of like you had said about hunting buddies, when I mentioned that topic, you thought, what are we going to talk about there? Well, when you mentioned hunting applications, I thought, where's he going with this, and kind of what can we get into? And after seeing what you've put together and talking about it with you, I think it's going to be really really beneficial and really a good conversation to have. So just another way that you can apply technology into our what we do and help us be more effective and efficient in the field. So a really great chat there. And then we're going to talk a little bit about scouting. And I shouldn't say we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to talk a bit about scouting. We've mentioned probably in every episode of this series that scouting is one of the most, if not the most important thing that you can do in waterfowl hunting to ensure that you have success on a regular basis. And, we've said that a lot, but we've never really talked about what goes into that scouting and what you should be looking for and things that you should be doing and all of that kind of stuff. So, scouting is one of the most frequently mentioned things when you're talking waterfowl hunting, but it's one of the least frequently discussed areas of waterfowl hunting. So we're going to take care of that this episode, and we're going to go in depth on scouting and scouting techniques and things like that. So a lot of great information for anyone out there who, hasn't had as much success scouting or doesn't exactly know what they're looking for and that kind of thing. So we're going to get into that in great detail this week. So, as we kind of get going here, the hunting application is going to be sort of hand in hand with the scouting segment. There's going to be a lot of things that kind of cross over and that you'll hear us mention a couple different times. So I think that, all of it's going to be interrelated in a really good beneficial episode here, as we celebrate our 10th episode anniversary.
Yeah, I wanted to throw out a thank you for the people that have written us too. There's a ton of great questions that they bring up, and specifics that they want to hear us talk about. So anyone who's emailed or, any kind of calls that we've received, just want to say thanks for reaching out. And for everyone else, don't be shy if you have a question or an idea. So they actually mentioned a few things that we're already trying to put in place. So hopefully we bring those to you soon.
Yep, and we do our very best to respond to each and every one of you that reach out to the show. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can hit us on our email at info@hpoutdoors.com. You can call us on the HP Outdoors Waterfowl hotline, 724-609-FOWL, 724-609-3695. Or you can reach to us on Facebook and Twitter. We've really recently put a much larger emphasis on our Twitter account. So if you go onto Twitter and follow us, we will follow you back. And we like to sort of keep in touch with everyone that's interested in our show through that medium as well. So all of the social media stuff is a great. And of course, you can go to hpoutdoors.com, check out all the episodes. We have a contact form there. You can shoot us an email right through the website if that's the easiest for you. So what do you say, Dan? Let's go ahead and get started, and let's talk about hunting applications. And why don't you go ahead and give us a little background as far as why this segment kind of came to your mind when we started brainstorming about things we wanted to talk about?
Well, I'll start out by saying that I'm probably addicted to my phone, and if someone doesn't believe me, they could ask my wife. So just right off the bat, like I always like checking out new apps and always looking online, reading different articles and searching things. And when it comes to hunting season, even if it's looking at the sunrise time or, shooting time, stuff like that, I'm always looking at my phone. And I always, if I'm in a swamp or in a tree stand or wherever I'm at, I always have my phone on me. So there's always something that it has available to me that can make my hunt more successful. So that's the reason that I brought it up. And I just want to talk a little bit about the apps that I use and what I think, might be overlooked that might help some other people. So that's where it came from.
Yeah, and I think the best way to approach this is going to be to try to break it down, talk about apps in different categories. And the first category I think that's a good one to cover is weather. I think probably most people, I would have to imagine, already have a weather app on their phone that they use for whatever reason. It could be to, see how you need to dress your kids for school tomorrow, or you may already use it for hunting. But if you don't use it for hunting or you haven't downloaded one yet, the Weather Channel has a pretty good app out there that's free. It's not perfect. It's got some quirks and some things to it. And sometimes the radar takes a little bit longer to load and, all that kind of stuff. But in general, out of a good weather app, you can get, temperatures, how the temperature is going to be throughout the day, wind direction, miles per hour, all of those sort of things, pretty important things to consider when you're out there in the waterfowl field chasing ducks and geese. So, a good place to start if you're looking to get something for weather would be the Weather Channel app.
Yeah, and I have the Weather Channel app. I did the latest update with it, and I'm not a fan of it. Just it seems like it takes a really long time to load, and the radar just seems really spotty on it. So actually, a guy at work introduced me to one. It's the NOAA radar, and it's free. It seems to be exactly spot on with any bands of rain coming or wind direction. You can set alerts for different areas. So if you have stands in, different states that you plan on going out and hunting, you can set alerts for what's coming to that area. The one that I have is it's free app. They also have a higher level one for $1.99. I'm not sure exactly what that does. I don't think you need it. But another one that I'd like to use, it's called Scout Look, and it's made for deer hunting, but I think it can be adapted to waterfowl. It also has great radar. You can pin all of your stands or blinds, and it plays a big part with the wind direction, so you know how to set up. And we've talked about how important that is already on the show. That one is $1.99, but I think it's pretty stellar for anyone that is out in the woods or in the swamp or in the field. And the wind direction actually has a cone on it, and it varies. So, I mean, it gets pretty intense, and I like that one for sure.
Yeah, that sounds like it's probably one of the more comprehensive options on the market out there. Again, $1.99. If you like to stay in the free category, AccuWeather also has an app on the iTunes App Store that I've used in the past, and again, it's one of those things where when you're going the free route, yeah, the information that you're looking for is probably on there, but you're going to deal with, pop-up ads and banners and, junk like that on the app. So clutters it up a little bit, but, at the end of the day, if what you're looking for is wind direction, wind speed, temperatures, that kind of thing, all of those will accomplish the task, one way or the other. So another area that the app market has really kind of flourished in lately is just simply the stuff that DU has been putting out. Ducks Unlimited has several different applications that you can download. Most of them are free, and they can be really helpful. The general Ducks Unlimited app has a lot of different features that guys would use all the time. Waterfowl ID. Different events, you can look up dinners and banquets in your area, that kind of thing. It'll give you, the sunrise and the sunset calculators, other general news as far as waterfowl and waterfowl conservation, that kind of stuff. So it's a good one for, during slow times or down times in the blind. You can leaf through there and take a look at some stuff. Or, sometimes you'll get on these forums and, people want to know, help me ID this duck. Maybe if they had that app, they can do a little bit more of that for themselves. So, the Ducks Unlimited app is just a good one to have for general information. And again, it's free, so it doesn't really cost you anything.
And then the almighty DU waterfowl migration app, which I find it to be glorious in itself. You'll find a hunting report submitted by a Danimal every once in a while, and that'd be yours truly. But I always
was gonna say, I have no idea. I have no idea who Danimal is. So
yeah, but I always get on there and view it. And I know our good friend Trav, he when it comes time to hit the Eastern Shore, he's always on there, and he sends probably about 5 or 6 texts per day before we head down there, just letting us know how many birds are in the area. So, it's a great app, and there's a lot of people on there that write about it, and it gives you a good idea of how many birds are in the area.
It's funny you bring Travis up, because I can remember the last time that we went out to the Eastern Shore, and this app allows you to sort by state or by flyaway, or, however you want to break it down. And I remember him religiously checking the Atlantic flyway to ensure that we knew what the bird movement was like all the way up and down the Atlantic coast. So if there was a push of birds anywhere on the Eastern Shore, Trav had it figured out, and he knew where the birds were at. So it's fun to see what's going on in your area, but also it's neat to check out what bird movement's like, in other parts of the country and that kind of thing. And for us, we were going out to Maryland, and it was kind of cool to see, that some birds were moving around in our area, and kind of lifted our spirits and kind of got us a little bit more excited for the hunt. So he definitely put that app to use that weekend for sure.
Yeah, I think he wore it out. You didn't hear half of it on a trip down, and he's looking in the air the whole time, or he's looking at his phone and be like, "Oh, there's birds in New York, so they might make it down." And it's just a fun trip, any kind of hunting trip. So another thing that DU has is the Waterfowl Journal, which they just converted it to a free app. I haven't used it, but if you want to record details of a hunt, or make a photo album on there, they have that available as well. So some guys do that, but I haven't got into the journal side of hunts yet. But it might be something I get into in the future, just to remember all the good times.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they made that free, because I know a lot of people like to do notes in a notebook and that kind of thing, and some guys are just now all on the technology and do everything on their phone or tablet or whatever the case might be. But for a lot of years, I was a member of a whitetail hunt club, and I would note in a journal every day that I hunted, the time, the temperature, the wind direction, how many deer I saw, what stand was I in, what direction did they come from, all of those details, because this was a deer club that was competitive for slots. So if I had the opportunity to get back into a spot where I had a successful hunt in the past with similar conditions, I felt like that gave me a little bit of a leg up than the guy that was just trying to find an open blind to get in, or whatever the situation might be. So I think there's a lot of merit to journal, and that's something that I want to touch on when it comes to scouting for birds later on in the show here. So, anyway, Ducks Unlimited apps are all really good. I definitely recommend checking them out. And if nothing else, it gives you something to read when you're bored and keeps you engaged in the waterfowl discussion. So let's talk about a couple more, another group that, kind of helps you with location and places you can hunt and regulations, that kind of stuff. And when you're talking location in today's day and age, you can't go any further in the conversation without bringing up Google Earth. I mean, this is the, this is the big dog on the block. It has incredible features, incredible functions. It's free, incredible detail on the satellite imaging. All of that kind of stuff is just infinitely valuable for any kind of hunter, specifically a waterfowl hunter looking for pockets of water and things and back off of roads that can't be seen from the roads and that kind of thing. So, I know you use Google Earth a bunch, Dan. I definitely do. And if you don't have Google Earth on your phone, you should probably just pause the podcast and fire up your iPhone right now and download it because you're definitely missing out. Yeah,
that's something I think everybody needs. Like, it's just, you can't beat it. It's, I know a buddy of mine, we were in a swamp a little bit ago and we couldn't get through a couple cattails. And when I say couple, I mean just a wall of floating cattails. So, it was pretty tough. We were scouting a spot and I told him, I was like, man, it only, we're halfway there and we're only, 30 yards into the swamp. So I know it was only another 30 yards, but we could not find it. And finally we're, waist deep in a swamp. And I pulled my phone out and I said, let's try down here. And we got down and found a little beaver run and actually got out to where we needed to be. So like I said, I always have my phone on me and that's just one that you need it if you're going to be scouting.
Yeah. Like I said, can't agree with you more. Another one that I really lean on, not so much for location, but, here in the state of Virginia, the Department of Inland and Game Fisheries, the yearly book that they publish with all the regulations and guidelines and things, they've actually created an app where all of that, I can take with me right on my phone. It's got a sunrise and sunset calculator. It's got a flashlight. It's got some other things, but it's just really nice to see, when I'm in the blind, if I need to pull up and reference something as far as, what's our limit on these or when's this in season, when's that not in season, that kind of thing. It's just nice to have that on the go with you. And, you can address any questions that come up kind of on the spot. So I know a lot of other states offer a similar app for your regulations and that kind of thing. If you're not aware if your state does or not, it's definitely worth taking a look into and seeing if you can pick that up for free as well.
Yeah, a quick search could show that. Another thing that Pennsylvania has is an app for the state game lands, and it pulls up the entire state. It has each game land's pinned on it. You can click. It'll give you directions from where you're at, and quite a bit of information there. So there's tons of good location apps.
Yeah, there's no shortage of that. So, like you said, if you find yourself getting turned around in the dark or something like that, you really don't have an excuse. All you got to do is pull your phone out and pull up Google Earth, and a lot of what's really important about that is it'll work in areas where you don't have cell phone signal. It doesn't work off of a cellular signal. It's a satellite GPS signal. So it'll work in a lot of areas where you won't be able to use your phone, but you'll still be able to use the GPS satellite tracking capabilities of your phone to get some Google locations for your Google Earth. So definitely worthwhile to have.
Yeah. Another one that I like, in addition to the DU app, as far as the Waterfowl ID, the LeMaster Method Waterfowl ID Guide. And the DU ID Guide, if you're trying to find birds, it's pretty specific, but this LeMaster Method has, down to the bill and the sizes, and it's just really good. And it's something that, we talked about, Pennsylvania missed out on a teal season, and, because people thought that, our IDing capabilities weren't up to par. So I think this could help people out quite a bit, in the field if you're not sure what you shot, or, out of the field to brush up before you go out, which you should be doing. And it's just a great app, and that was free as well.
Yeah, and the Lemaster method, I have that book in hard copy, and it's drawn to scale where you can identify birds by the bill, which is great for a bird that you've already harvested. The concerns with these early teal seasons and things of that nature is, these birds you got to be able to identify in flight, sometimes in low light, that kind of thing makes it more challenging. The Lemaster method also identifies birds by, the height that they fly. Are they high flyers? Do they fly more low to the water? What kind of colors and things will you see on birds in flight? How do they compare body size wise to other types of birds that you may see in flight? So it's a really good comprehensive method. If you're new to waterfowling, you definitely need to check out that book or that app. I mean, it's incredibly informative and very, very helpful when you're trying to figure out what's what in waterfowl. So definitely recommend checking that out. There's another app out that's kind of new to the market, and I haven't used it yet. So I'll let Dan tell us about the new app that Mojo Outdoors came out with.
Yeah, I pretty much deem this the everything app, and it really is. This app that Mojo has, they have a free one, and then they have one that is, I think it's $9.99. I didn't buy that one. I have the free one, but it has just about everything. It has a journal, like the DU Waterfowl journal. The maps that they have are amazing. You can pin waypoints into a blind site. You can pin your blind sites. You can pin spots as a roosting area. You can pin spots as a feeding area. You can pin spots where you had sightings at. They have all your boat ramps, any kind of channels to get into different marshes. You can even pin if an area has a muddy bottom that you're hunting. So, I mean, it's really in-depth. It's pretty awesome. Also, they have a spot where you can, I guess that your buddies would have to have the app, but you can create a trip and invite friends. So you can invite friends. You can tell them when you're leaving, where you're going, what you need. In addition to that,
before you go on, Dan, that's a really great one as far as a safety aspect. You can get your wife to download, or your brother, your hunting buddy, or whoever to download the app, and that way, when you're heading out for the day, they know the area that you're going to be in. So if you're not back by the time that you said you were going to be, they know if there's an emergency, they at least have an area that they know where they can start to look and try to help. So I thought that was a really great feature just from a safety aspect.
Yeah, that's a great tip and something I didn't even think about. In addition to that, they have a bird and the sound of a bird identification. They have a spot for state regulations, and of course you can shop for any Mojo gear that you need. So, I mean, it's pretty much an everything app, and like I said, it's free. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out, I would consider doing that if I were you. It's pretty impressive. Yeah,
I'm definitely gonna take that into consideration and probably download that this evening and just try it out. I mean, I'm like you. I'm addicted to my phone. I'm constantly on Twitter and Facebook and playing with different apps, so I can see myself definitely fitting right in with the Mojo Outdoors app. So, another couple apps that I've started using that I think are really great. For one is the GoPro app. We've made a little more concerted effort to try to film some of our hunts this year and that kind of stuff. And, when I'm looking at purchasing a GoPro, if you want to buy a remote separately, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but you're talking maybe $80 or $90, I think, for the Wi-Fi remote. And, they have a free app that you can download, and you can control your GoPro right through your phone, and you can see, a live view of what you're recording on your phone. And it's a little bit delayed, but it certainly works. And for me, I'm the type of guy that, just to take a step back here, I'm the type of guy that always has like the phone prior to what's current. So like the iPhone 6 just came out. I just got an iPhone 5S because I could upgrade for free. So I just got the iPhone 5S, but prior to that I had the iPhone 4. Well, the GoPro app works perfectly on the iPhone 4. So now that rides in the Pelican case with my GoPro, and it's just my GoPro remote. It's just an old iPhone 4 that I have. So it works great. And I've got the app on there, and it works perfectly, and it saved me $90. So for me, that's definitely a cool feature. So if you've got a GoPro and you're looking to, try to work off camera a little bit and maybe set the camera out by the decoys, or, do a little something different, and you don't want to buy the remote, check out the app for your phone. Works really well, and definitely couldn't recommend that anymore. Also, for guys that hunt rivers and tidal areas and coastal waters and that kind of stuff, how important tide is, and knowing when the tide's going to be high and when it's going to be low, and all of those sort of things. So there's several different free tide chart apps out there that you can download that will tell you when the previous high tide was, when the next one will be, that sort of stuff. Me and my buddy Carlos hunted the first Virginia split here, and we hunted 4 days in a row on the Potomac River, and we learned really quickly how hard it can be to get back into some of those backwater areas in a low tide. I mean, we were in a canoe that, only drafts a couple inches of water, and I don't even know if we had a couple inches of water in some of the spots when we were trying to get back in there in the dark. So a lot of mud, and, it would have been nice to kind of know what we were getting into. Had we known that the tide was going to be low, I would have had maybe a push pole or something a little better to work with. So again, it's fortunate to know that, other sort of things, if the tide's going to be up, depending on where you're hunting, you might need to have a little bit longer decoy cords and that kind of thing. So it's just all very helpful when you're planning your hunt to ensure that those sort of details. So, what do you think, Dan? Any other apps do you think that we've missed that, people would benefit from?
Not that I know of. So if you guys have anything that you use, send us an email. And I do like that you use your phone for the GoPro app, because that, for some reason, just absolutely burns through battery life. So it would be nice to have a second option there.
Yeah. And, like I said, the back of that phone is smashed, and, it's just going to sit in my office and collect dust. So I thought, well, you know what, perfect fit for this, and I can still keep it in use. So worked out really well. And so far I'm really, really happy with that. But like Dan said, if you have an app that you're using that you think, is a really good one that we've missed, shoot us an email, info@hpoutdoors.com, or hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, and share that with us. And we'll certainly pass that along to all of the listeners here, and, keep the conversation going on that. So what do you think, Dan? You want to start talking about a little bit of scouting?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. All right. So this is, in my opinion, one of the most important topics that we've talked about on the show, and maybe the most important topic that we ever will talk about on this show. And that is scouting, how to do it, what to look for, and, just sort of some all around tips and techniques to help you, help be more effective when you're scouting, because you can burn up all the diesel fuel you want and spend all the time you want driving around glassing fields. If you don't know what you're looking for, you're not doing yourself any favors. You might as well just be at home hanging out, because, there's things that you need to consider when you're scouting. And there's things that, you absolutely have to, take into consideration before you commit to a field for the next day's hunt. So before we get into this, Dan, I know we haven't talked about this at all, but in your opinion, what's the number one thing that someone needs to consider when they're scouting?
That's a great question. You have to know your area, and you have to know what the birds are doing in that area. And what I mean by that, the roost spots, the loafing spots, and just the general layout of your area, where the water's at, where the fields are at. And it's a tough question, but you just need to know what's around you. And that's what I would say.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a part of it. I think that's challenging if you're, driving out to North Dakota to do a week-long Nodak hunt, and you've never been there before. That creates a challenge in that regard. But for me, I think the most important thing, and I'll explain as to why I feel this way. I think the most important thing is when you see birds on the ground and you see them in a field, you need to ask yourself, why are those birds in this field? What is it that's about this particular field that they want to be in there? Is it the type of feed that's there? Is it the cover, the concealment, the protection, the sheer security of the flock of numbers that were there that drew them there? There's a lot of different things that can go into why those birds are in that field, but it's important to understand why, because you want birds that are committed to the field. You don't want to have that hunt where you see the birds in the field the night before, you set up the next day, and then they don't show. So if you can understand why they're there in the first place, that helps you get a better idea as to if they'll be there tomorrow. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go here. But before we get into it too much, I thought it would be good to talk about the tools that you need to have when you decide to take on a scouting trip. So there's some obvious ones, but we're going to go through a little checklist here just to make sure that everybody's thinking on the same page when we consider this. The first one for me is topo maps, aerial maps, that kind of stuff. It's going to help you understand what's around you, like you were saying, if you're hunting somewhere that you're not familiar with. But also you could break it down to as far as on a topo map, you might be able to see, okay, I've identified this is the field that they're in. This is what I want to hunt. Let me look at the terrain of this field. Is there a spot in this field that's going to be more advantageous for me to set up than another, based on the wind direction, et cetera, the slope, all that. It'll help you pinpoint that final detail, that little bit of extra detail that you're going to pay attention to that, the other guys don't. And that's going to cause you to have a little bit more success than the other guys. So topo maps and aerial maps, street maps to help you get around, all of that stuff, super important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And that actually showed on the opening day of goose season up here when you came up. A lot of the birds were landing on the backside of a hill. You couldn't quite see them. You couldn't, you didn't know how many numbers were there unless you were there the entire time and you weren't following other birds. So that's a great point. And on top of that, I just want to say with, the topo maps, knowing where that feed is at in that field, and I know we'll get into this later on too, but if they were at the top end of the field, and I think this is a situation that we had on opening day, they were in the top end of the field to begin with, and they wore that field out, and we could even tell when we got into the field that we should have been lower, but we had some different points of views when we got out there, and we did what we did, but you could tell where we should have been, and that could have been avoided with glassing and checking what they were actually eating on that opening day.
Yeah, we've referenced that hunt a couple times on this show, and I want to put a little more perspective into that is the kind of what happened there. So, like Dan said, this is the day before the goose opener in Pennsylvania, and we're hunting a typically very high pressure area. We anticipated most of the fields around us to have hunters in them as they'd had in the past. So we're watching birds go into this field, and we had guys that we're close with checking these fields on a daily basis and seeing birds that are in there. And the tricky part about the field that we were going to hunt was birds were definitely piling into it, but it was difficult to see how many because of the backside of the field sloped away from the street. So when we set up that morning, we opted to stay up on top of the slope for visibility purposes and to help draw birds that, may be circling the area. Having the benefit of hindsight and watching birds still land down in there when we were in the field, I think that the reason why those birds were in the field where they were is because it gave them that concealment from the road. And, the trucks weren't sitting there staring at those birds in the field for as long as they were at other fields because they couldn't see them. Once they put their feet on the ground, they were concealed from the street because of the topography of that field. So that was a built-in security for them. And it was clear that, we had however many dozen decoys up on the flat. They didn't care about that because they knew where it was safe to be in that field, and they pitched down onto that slope. So that's a little bit what I mean by, it's important to know why they're in the field that they're in and things to consider. But, having the benefit of hindsight, we kind of overthought that a little bit. We thought, well, let's stay up here, get good visibility. That's common sense. That's a typical practice, when in reality, we should have just put ourselves right there where they wanted to be. And, we would have been covered up that morning. But anyway, good lesson learned. Other things to consider when you're going on, a scouting trip. Make sure you got a good set of binoculars, spotting scope, something that's going to allow you to look out, depending on what part of the country you hunt. If you're looking at 100-acre field or something massive like that, you might need a good set of optics to be able to reach out and get a good look at, what's in that field. So definitely don't forget that. And, you want to make sure that you have the ability to look at whatever kind of terrain that whatever you're driving by.
Yeah, I agree with that. And something else, I talked about not keeping a journal on my actual hunts, but something I do keep track of is where the birds are at as far as patterns. And that's something that, year after year, especially the local birds that don't end up getting shot and stick around, that's something that you can always go back to, and you can check the dates and, the weather and where they're going. So keeping a journal to track patterns is something that everyone should be doing.
Yep. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about patterns a little bit later in the discussion, but I definitely think it's critical to track them. And it's critical to do so with a GPS or Google Earth. Mark the locations, where they're staying, where they're going, the routes that they take. All of that stuff is vital information to consider when you're trying to plan your next hunt, because you may not be able to get permission to hunt that exact field they want to be in. But if you know the flight paths that they've been taking, fields that they've hit in the past, fields that maybe are just getting ready or have been recently harvested, all of that kind of stuff will play into it. So having that journal to roll back on is critical in my opinion. Some of the less commonly used scouting techniques for waterfowl is trail cameras. Most guys got them set up on their deer scrapes and all that kind of stuff, but I've seen a lot of guys have them in the backwater areas strapped onto a tree, and they get all kinds of pictures and videos of woodies and mallards and teal and birds of that nature that are back in those backwaters. So it's a great way to keep eyes on your hole. If you've got a spot cleared out back in the timber that you're hoping to hunt, go pull the card, take a look. If birds are using that area, you might want to go ahead and jump in there. So I think, don't overlook using trail cameras just because they're primarily marketed towards the deer.
Yeah, I think some of the coolest trail cam pics are of waterfowl that I've seen. You get them doing all kinds of weird stuff or landing, and they just take some great pictures too. So I agree with you.
Yeah. And the last thing that I'll say for, I'll call it a tool, but I think it's always good to have somebody with you when you're scouting. Take a buddy, take your wife, take your kids, take whoever with you, because if you're going to scout those birds from roost to the field, you might be driving a couple miles, and it's a lot easier to follow those birds if you've got somebody in the vehicle helping you, or someone that can help you take notes or anything along those lines. So, and it always helps to have a little company in the vehicle. So I would recommend trying to find somebody to go with you when you go scouting if you can. Yeah,
second set of eyes never hurts. There's every time we're out hunting, we're like, you see those birds and someone won't see it, and someone will. And it always, it never hurts to have, 4 eyes are better than 2. So it's a good point.
No doubt. So, okay, now I want to talk about the second phase of scouting. And this is what I would consider sort of what you need to think about before you hit the road. So, like I said before, if you just hit the road and just drive around aimlessly, if you don't know what you're looking for, you might as well be wasting your time. So for me, the first thing is identify the area that you plan to focus on. So, if you're hunting close to home, this is generally the area that I have permission to hunt, or, this is where the primary waterfowl roost is. So I'm going to follow the birds and, track them within this certain period, or I'm just not willing to drive this far, or whatever the case might be. But I think it's important to just say, okay, look at a map and say this area, we're going to focus on this area because we know birds are holding here or there or wherever, whatever the case might be. Focus on the area and then decide on a plan of attack. How are you going to hit that area to make sure you scout it thoroughly? If you just go out and just drive around and say, all right, let's take a right here. Let's go see what's here. Let's take a left here. You may drive around and miss the field that's slammed full of birds. And you might not see a bird and be like, yeah, didn't see anything. Not a good area to hunt. Let's try somewhere else. So it's important to make sure you canvass the area thoroughly if you know that there are in fact birds in the area. So that's my first number one tip to think about before you hit the road.
Yeah, and everything we're talking about, I just keep thinking about what app I can use to do that. So talking, straight back to Google Earth, if you think you know a roost spot, starting out in the morning on those and following birds, like that's just a good place to start. If it's an area or an area that you traveled to hunt, that's a good starting point.
And when you're looking at these, the DU migration apps and, various online forums where people are talking about the hunting success and that kind of thing, it's always a good practice to not only see what people are doing in your area, but focus on the people that hunt north of where you are. So for me in Virginia, if I'm seeing a lot of migratory activity or a lot of, guys having success in, Eastern Pennsylvania, upstate New York, Finger Lake regions, things of that nature, I know birds are moving down and they're coming my way. So for me, that is an exciting time. And I know that I'm getting new birds that haven't been hunted in my particular area within the next couple of days. So very, very helpful when I'm looking to try to get on a good hunt. Further to that, several states will actually publish survey numbers. So on a weekly basis, they'll go through and they'll do waterfowl counts and surveys, and you'll be able to see, how the bird levels of different species and things have come into the area. A really good one that I watch a lot is the Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge on the eastern shore of Maryland. Being that we hunt out there, they count on a weekly basis. They break it down by Canada goose, snow geese, all the different various duck breeds. And they've got survey numbers every week. So you can really see when, the different types of birds are pushing through. You see the puddlers coming down, and then you start seeing the bluebills and the diver duck species their numbers start creeping up. So, depending on what you're looking to hunt and what the weather is doing and that kind of thing, you can get a good feel as to when the push is on, and maybe you need to call off work and get out to your favorite spot, that kind of thing. So those are just some good, good sort of places to look for information that the average guy is not going to take the time to look at that kind of information. So, a little something to give you another opportunity to separate yourself.
Just in addition to the migration app, getting online forums, getting on and, reading what people are saying or, engaging and asking what people are saying. Waterfowl hunters aren't quick to share their spots with you, but it seems like they're very quick to either brag about awesome hunts that they have with, a ton of birds being in the area, or they're very quick to tell you that the birds aren't there. So it's a great place to go. In addition to the migration app, is just there's tons of online forums to check out.
Yep. And just along those same lines too, I have to imagine that most waterfowl hunters do this, but if you don't, you need to be watching the weather and knowing what fronts are coming your way and what fronts might be pushing birds. I mean, I know there's a front coming through. I sent Dan an email this morning and I said, hey, are you supposed to get some snow this weekend? Because I know when temperatures are dropping in Pennsylvania, those birds are going to push south towards me. So if you're not checking weather and focusing on what's north of you and what's coming your way, definitely start doing that, because your birds will definitely be, riding those north winds as they migrate south. So another really good thing to keep in mind. The final thing that I'm going to bring up about what you need to do before you hit the road is talking to a local, conservation officer, biologist, DNR representative, that kind of thing. We've talked about this before in the past. We've got some really good questions about this from you guys in the past. But these guys will be able to tell you, hard to reach locations on public ground. I had an example where I hunted a local military base this year for the first time, and I just happened to be checking in with the people on base, and the local biologist was there. And I mean, he was just volunteering great information. I didn't even have to ask him questions. He was telling me what were the best blinds, which ones are tough to get to in low tide, all of that kind of stuff. That's critical for me because, as someone that hadn't hunted that area very much, all this is new to me. But the guys have been hunting that ground for several years. They're all aware of all of this. So they know, well, if low tide's going to be at this time, I don't want to be in that blind back there because it's going to be a pain in the neck to get back to. For me, that's exactly where I want to be because I don't want to be anywhere else where the normal guy can just walk in and you can get to. I'm willing to go that little extra effort and, I take advantage of that, get back in there, see more birds, have better hunts. So if you haven't done that in the past, just try it. Give them a call. They're usually very, very accommodating and super helpful. We've got multiple, emails and stuff from folks listening to this show that because of what, hearing us talk about it, they've done just that and they got a ton of great information for them. So I would absolutely encourage you guys to reach out and touch base with those folks if you haven't yet in the past. What do you think, Dan? Anything else that you like to sort of check off before you hit the road on a scouting trip?
Yeah, just going back to that weather, I'm always on, weather.com on my desktop and, I'll extend it to the 10-day forecast. And most of the time, wind direction is huge for archery hunters. So I'm always checking that and knowing what stands that I can actually hunt on my property depending on the wind. So when I'm checking a 10-day forecast and I know that, north wind, northwest wind for the next 8 out of 10 days, that also gets me excited because I know that one, the temperature is going to be getting colder this time of year, and that means that birds are going to be showing up. So I think that's just a great tip to always be looking at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no question. Okay, let's talk about you're on the road now. You're in the truck. You're cruising dirt roads, and you're out there looking for birds. Talk to me, Dan, about what we're going to be doing. If you and I are in the truck, and I ask you, what are we looking for out here, Dan? Tell me, show me the way, bud. What are you going to tell me? What are we looking for first off?
We're going to find out where they're roosting at, and you can find that late at night where they're flying to, and first thing in the morning, go and wake up with them, and you're going to want to follow them to a field, and that's pretty much how we would start our trip.
Yeah, and the roost is where it all starts, obviously, and you have to be really, really careful when you're talking about the roost and hunting near the roost. A lot of guys say you don't want to hunt anywhere within 3/4 of a mile to a mile at times of the roost, because if you blow out the roost, there's a good chance that those birds are going to move on and you're going to lose your opportunity to successfully hunt them. So I do subscribe to that. I think you need to be very, very protective of the roost when at all possible. But it's also important to identify the difference between a roost location and a loafing location. So for those that aren't sure of the two, a roost is where these birds are going to be their sanctuary. They're going to stay there overnight. It's where they group up. They feel most secure. A loafing location is a spot that they might hit during the day, either before going out to feed or coming back from feed, where they just literally hang out and spend a good portion of their day just relaxing and floating around and that kind of stuff on these locations. Those can be okay to hunt if you can confirm that this is not the roost location. So you may not get every bird in the flock coming to these loafed locations, but they are okay to hunt if you enjoy hunting over open water, or that's the only kind of hunting that you have access to is hunting over open water. Those can be really good hunts, but it's important that you identify the difference between the two, because like I said, you really got to be careful when you're hunting roost locations. And Dan, I know you've got a really good spot that you've hunted a bunch of times. That's a loafing pond where you guys have done a bunch of really, really nice hunts there. And that hole continues to produce year in and year out, day after day through the season when you guys can get in there, because it's not the main roost, and it's located almost directly between two massive roost locations, and birds just cycle through there all day long, and spending a little bit of time before they go on to their next location. So I know you can relate very well to a loafing location being a great hunting spot.
Yeah, and like you said, and you can read and read and read for days about shooting the roost and it not coming back to fruition. And we've seen that quite a few times as well. If the birds are there and they, like you said, it's a sanctuary and they want to feel safe there. So if they, wake up and they're getting blasted at, it's going to be gone. It's over. So, a lot of the guys, if you do have a split in a season, or if you notice birds starting to leave the area, a lot of guys will get a group and, go and have a bang out hunt there. And they know for that year that location is going to be pretty much dead. So just something to think about. But yeah, if you can find a loafing location between roost spots and, some feed around, that's what, we don't hunt that all the time, but when we do, it's pretty awesome. So, you said it, you nailed it there.
So, if you're not hunting a roost, obviously, or you're not hunting a loafing location, the other areas that you're going to want to find are, when you're driving around, you're looking for birds, in fields and that kind of thing. And for me, the number one thing to look at when you do see birds on the ground, you want to see birds when they fly over, that they're coming into that field. They're locked in and they're committed to that field. And this gets back to my number one point. If you've got birds that when they crest that hill or they crest that tree line, they're locked and they're coming to that field, they're committed no matter what. That there's a reason why they're that committed to that field. You want birds that are committed. You want birds that want to put their feet on the ground in that field. You're not looking for birds that, might be going to another location or might circle a couple times and are sketchy and weary, that kind of thing. If you can find a field that's holding a lot of birds that are committed to that field, that's going to maximize your opportunities and your chances to have a good hunt the next day. You can see a lot of birds flying in the air, and if they're flying over these fields that you're driving by, you're like, oh, well, maybe we can hunt some traffic here, maybe we can hunt some traffic there. That may work a little bit, but you're not going to have the type of hunt that you're going to have in a field where these birds are committed from jump and they're coming in and they're going to land in there regardless. That's the type of hunts where you don't need decoys, you don't need calls, you just need to be concealed, and you're going to shoot your limit of geese. But it's easier said than done than to find those fields. I know that.
Yeah. And just a tip and I know I'm just thinking back when we were talking to Casey, all their fields, all their corn is already cut. He was saying, it was cut in, early October, or late September, but areas around here, we still have corn standing everywhere. They're just starting to pick it. So if you're in an area like this, a good tip right now is to go to the farmers that own those cornfields before they're cut and go and ask for permission now, because when it does get cut and people finally start seeing birds there, they're going to have 30 or 40 people knocking on their door to get permission. So if you do that now, just thinking ahead, that could really pay off in a couple months here.
Yep. And I'm going to touch on something in just a second that feeds right into that. But before we do that, I wanted to just note really quickly, when you're scouting and you're looking at birds in the air, don't disregard small groups of birds, doubles, triples, pairs, small family groups, that kind of thing. Don't disregard those groups just because they're not flying in massive flocks. Those little flocks can lead you to the same spots that those big flocks are going. And, a lot of times it's better to hunt the locations where those smaller flocks are going, because you're going to have a chance to shoot multiple smaller groups of birds in the same area, vice a field where you get set up and you got 80 birds coming in one group. A lot harder to work. You're going to educate more birds, and you may only get 1-2 passes at a flock like that, and then your morning might be done. So if you can find a field that's holding multiple smaller flocks of birds, it's all likelihood it's going to give you a better opportunity to make a better morning out of it than one that everything flies in one big group. And you kind of take what you get out of that group, and then you may get a couple singles or doubles that break off of that trying to get back in there. But in general, you shoot into that big flock, it's probably, going to blow your morning for the rest of the day for you. But, so don't disregard the little flocks.
Those are the best ones. Those groups of 3 and 4, and I'll take those over groups of 30 any day.
Oh yeah, no question. No doubt about that whatsoever. But getting back to what you just said, Dan, about cornfields being cut and that kind of thing, I think it's important when you're scouting to have a two-tiered approach. I think it's important to think long-term as far as what are you going to be able to hunt down the road, and it's good to look short-term. What can I hunt tomorrow or the next day or the next weekend? Your tip of talking to the landowners before they cut the fields off, that's absolutely a long-term thought process that is awesome. I mean, if you can pull that off, you're in the chips. If you can secure a field before anybody else is knocking on the door, you're that much further ahead. But short term, with the winter and, rising creek levels and water levels and sheet water and that kind of thing, there might be a wetland that develops in the middle of a field that wasn't there 2 or 3 days ago because we get a heavy rain or a heavy snow or something melts off. That can attract birds and can be hot right now. And you can never really project that was going to happen because of the weather conditions that had just created that wetland. So, always keep in mind that just because you've driven by a field one time and it didn't hold birds, if weather patterns have changed and there's been a lot of precipitation in the area, it's not a bad idea to check those fields again, just to ensure that those drainages and that kind of stuff aren't holding birds, because those little overlooked pockets can just bang up incredible hunts because they get overlooked by everybody else. But you were smart enough to take a look back and check them out. So for me, I like to think long-term and short-term, when you're out scouting. Yeah.
And what I was saying about, the cut cornfields, just because I was today on my way home, I'm sitting there and, I look up and I'm following 40 birds, and I end up driving quite a bit out of the way from where I was supposed to be. But, and I'm going cornfield. Where are they going? And finally, with trick or treat going on, I had to break off and go home, but I had a general idea of where they were headed. So, that's what made me bring that up.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great idea. And, I think that's the way a lot of people work. They don't look for permission to some of these fields until they see birds in there. But again, get permission. And if birds never show up there, nothing lost. But if the birds are in there, it's nice to know that you're the one that's got the permission to get in there after them. So definitely a good tip to mention. And I'm sure the next time you go to a farmer who hasn't cut his corn yet and asks for permission, he's going to say, you know what? Somebody just came by here yesterday and asked me for permission. So I'm sorry. I'm not letting anybody else in there. So someone's going to pull that same move on you, Dan, I bet you.
Yeah. Hey, you never know. But I know, we missed out on a few last year because we waited and, we couldn't find birds where they normally were. And, we drove around and found them, and they said, just last week they started showing up. And right after that, a guy asked me, and for this year, he has sole permission on it. He's not leasing it, but unless you meet up and hunt with him, which we didn't know the guy and never got a hold of him. So we were kind of out of that, and there were, a couple hundred birds landing in that field. So, it hurts a little bit, but you learn your lesson, and you can guarantee that guy has already been spoken to this year.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So I want to talk about a little more in depth now about my number one point when we first started this conversation as to scouting, and what the most important thing is for me is to figure out where they are and why they're there. I can't stress this enough. I think it's super, super critical. And this is why I say that. If you can figure out why the birds are there, is it security? Is it, the feed that's there? Whatever it is. If you can figure that out, not only is it going to help you, to know if you have a good shot of getting on those birds again the next day in that field, but it's going to help you identify where those birds might go when they're out of that field. So if you get a good hunt in there and then the birds stop showing in that field, if you know it was in there because it was a fresh cut cornfield, or, there was a certain wind direction that worked off the roost, or it offered a certain level of security or cover, whatever the case might be, whatever that X factor is that makes that the X. If you can identify what that factor is, you have a better shot of identifying where that next X is going to be. Because when you're driving those fields, you're going to look for those same characteristics and those same features that drew those birds to that field to the next field that those birds are going to be in. So for me, like I said, super important, number one thing you should take into consideration when you find a flock of birds.
Yeah, if you can think like a bird and know what the reason is why they're going someplace, I mean, you're in the chips right there. And I just want to throw another thing out there, going back to, if it's a feed purpose of why they're in there, if and I understand some people don't hunt cornfields, and I'm just speaking to, around this area, but some of the farmers have better equipment than others, and a lot of farmers leave, I wouldn't say a lot, some farmers leave a lot of corn laying on the ground, and the majority of the time the birds are in that farmer's fields over another, just because there's a ton of food there. So something to think about, something you could, if you do have permission and can go walk the field to see what the terrain's like and see, what's laying around, that is a huge advantage for you.
Yeah. I mean, we've all seen, we all hunted those farmers' fields where you just look at you can't believe how much their combine leaves on the ground and that kind of stuff. So, definitely things to consider when you're trying to identify good fields. Another thing to consider is, the flight path that these birds are taking from the roost to that field. I mean, it's pretty important to know what direction these birds are going to be coming from when they approach this field for your setup purposes. You think about the terrain of the field, wind direction. How do you want to set up? You want to make it as easy as possible for these birds to work into your spread. So, take into consideration the wind, and if the way that you have to set up is going to have the birds swinging out to get into the right wind direction, that kind of stuff, it's better to know that ahead of time so that you can properly adjust your decoy spread and put yourself in the best position for success. So it's always critical, know where they're going to come from, and then you can set up your spread and your setup to that versus some other factor that you may consider when you're setting up the field.
Yeah, another thing is, know exactly where they are at in that field. We talk about the opening day hunt, and we were off by 30 yards and they were laying outside the decoys, and that was just a big disappointment for the opening day that could have been avoided, I think. But some of the guys that hunt 100-acre fields and 400-acre fields, that really comes into play if you're hunting a field of that size. And we actually got into another field that, it was probably 250, 300 acres with, a couple 400-acre fields around it. And, we had a bang out hunt this year because we knew exactly where those birds had been landing. And that was a great effort by Matt on his scouting, and he knew where those birds were at for a hunt that we had up here. So, I can't overstate that enough of knowing exactly where to be.
Yeah, and one thing to consider too, if birds are in the field feeding, if you're watching the birds when they first get there, I can probably guarantee you that the next day, those birds are not going to land in that exact same spot that you saw them land the first time the day before, if there's a decent sized numbers. And why I say that is because these birds, they're going to eat their way through the field, and the mass or the majority of the birds as they move are going to decimate the feed that's there. So a lot of times birds will land where they left off the night before because all the feed hasn't been decimated quite as much up that way. So take that into consideration. If it's a strict feed field and there's not terrain features to play into it, if it's just a big wide open cornfield or alfalfa field or whatever it is, if they've ate to a certain point, back off that space just a little bit and allow set your spread up there, because those birds that were feeding in that area the day before are going to think that the flock has just moved up a little bit into the field, and they will come to your spread and commit because they know that the field is up there. And that there's security in the numbers of the birds. So they'll want to land closer up into the hole where hopefully you have your hide. So something to consider when you're setting your spread for the day. So for me, another one that's is important when you're scouting, and I don't know where you stand on this, Dan, but for me, you want to decide how many birds is enough for you to want to hunt that field. You see some of these guys that hunt some of these Atlantic flyways and central flyways, and some of the flyways with large numbers of mallards and that kind of stuff, and they won't hunt a field unless it holds 500 mallards or better. That's obviously not the type of mallards that we see here, but when we're talking honkers and that kind of thing, and Canada geese, yeah, we want to see a couple hundred birds in the field if we can. Of course, if we have to, we'll hunt a field that holds 75 to 100. But if we can find a field that's got 250 birds in it, you can feel a lot better about that. And that's the kind of stuff you're looking for. So just because you're out scouting, you see a field that's holding 50 birds, don't give up on the night yet, and just, or the morning, whenever you're scouting, keep looking and keep that one in the back of your mind, but cover the area like we talked about. Canvas that area completely before you decide, okay, so we've got birds in ABC field. Then go back and analyze those fields and where were the birds, what's the terrain, what's the wind like, which ones can we get the best hide, and which ones are holding the most birds. Because if you stop short, you might miss the field that's holding 200 birds and you set up on a field that's holding 50 birds, and you're not going to have as great of a hunt, obviously. So for me, I think you need to fully scout your area before you commit or decide, okay, this is enough birds. This is the one we want to be in. So, what do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I think numbers is a good way to go. But also, if it is holding lower numbers, and if you were able to see the birds get into that field, I think that is also a huge advantage. If you have, if it's a flock of 50 and those are the only birds using that field, then, maybe if you, have to have a short hunt that day or something, and that you're going to get one shot, it's going to be a huge flock, then yeah, that might be a chance that you want to take. If it is, 70 birds and it's coming in groups of 4 and 6 and 10 and 4 and 5 and 7, that could be an awesome day for you. So, that goes back to the scouting and watching the birds coming into a field. So that it's kind of, yeah, you want all the numbers, but sometimes also those higher numbers, you're getting 5 flocks of 50, and, which that's not bad, but also, if you have 10 groups of 5 or 6 coming in, that could also be a great hunt for you.
Yeah, it all goes into it, and, but, in general, I think it's ideal to have a threshold that you think is, a good number, whether it be what's relevant for your area. Maybe it's 40 birds, maybe it's 100 birds, maybe it's 500 birds, but just have a general idea of what you should be seeing in a field that you anticipate being able to have a good hunt in. A little bit further into that too, when you're looking at these fields and you're analyzing them, consider the cover that's available in the fields, especially compared to where you think the birds are going to be set up and where you need to put your hide. If it's an area that's got, a depression and some longer grasses and things that would, a fence row, something that would allow you to brush in nice and tight, that's great. If it's an area that's, cut down to the dirt and not a lot of cover available, and you can't, dig your blinds in, or you can't get in a pit or something like that, you need to make a real tough decision there as far as, how am I going to hunt these birds? Is it worth scaring birds, educating birds, stuff like that? Or is it better off just to let them work through this field and move on to another field and get them, when they make that move? So something you got to consider when you're getting ready to hunt. Can I get, adequately concealed to where I can actually get a good hunt on these birds? So another thing to take into consideration.
Yeah. And Phil Robertson, I was just watching a commercial with him today, and it was for real tree. So, take it with a little bit of salt, but he says, you have to become a ghost. And he says he's not 100% ghost, but he's close to it. So, concealment, it's not overrated. If you're sticking out, it's not gonna be helpful for you.
Yep. I mean, we can't undersell the importance of concealment. I mean, it's critical, and that's probably something that we should talk about more in depth someday on the show, and perhaps we will do that. But to continue on today's conversation, another thing that's really important to consider is the structure of the flock in the field. What I mean by that is, how are you going to set your decoys? Are the birds packed in tight? Are they spaced out in family groups? Is there 100 birds? Is there 24 birds? You want to set your decoy spread as realistically as possible to what those birds saw the last time they were in that field. You don't want to go out and throw out, 10 dozen decoys just because you own that many. You don't put out a single decoy more than you need to actually have a successful hunt. Anything more than that is overkill and unnecessary, and, would just potentially lead to educating birds. So, I'm a minimalist in that regard. I think, you don't put out anything more than you absolutely have to get the job done.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And the structure birds can be difficult sometimes. We talked about it, the early season when it's warm, you have the family flocks of 5 or 6, and they're spread out in the groups. And then later in the season, they get bunched up. But I've seen a few where, the birds land in a field and then they get in a straight line and they'll walk. So that's always confusing sometimes of how you want to set up and how to go about it. So there's a learning curve on different types of setups, I guess.
Yep. And I mean, another thing too, when you're looking at the structure of the decoys and the stress of the flock and all that kind of stuff, sometimes it's easy to want to get carried away and get a little too close, or drive by the field a little too often, or sit there for too long, and just to try to get it all figured out. Do the best you can, take some pictures if you can, that kind of thing, but then get out of there, because not only are you going to potentially put the birds on edge and spook the field a little bit, but other guys are going to be driving around, and if guys see you sitting in your truck staring at these fields, they might try to move in on your territory. And if it's a landowner that's liberal with their permission, they might try to get there before you in the morning, or camp out in the field, or whatever it is. So, you got to kind of scout the birds, and you sort of have to scout other guys too, and make sure that you're not sort of tipping your hand when it comes to all that stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's always vantage points that you can get to. And if you're trying to watch birds get into a field, instead of being, 50 yards away from them, just sitting on a road where your vehicle's spooking them anyways, go off a few 100 yards and find a high spot and watch them just, fall into that field.
Yep. So I've got 2 more points left that I want to touch on when it comes to scouting and what to do on the road. The first one is sort of a no-brainer, but you want to look for cut fields, fresh cut fields. Like you said, if you can get permission beforehand, do it. If you can't, if it's a fresh field and you've seen it's recently cut, even if birds aren't hitting it yet, try to get permission. It's only going to help you in the long run. And for obvious reasons, birds could potentially be hitting that any day. The other thing is, this isn't as much the case when you're hunting around your home area, because you may know it a lot better. But for those who, go on trips and drive out of state and hunt areas that are unfamiliar to them, oftentimes it's necessary for one person in your hunting party to not hunt the morning that everyone else is out in the blind, or 2 people, and it's good for them to be out scouting, because if you're out in North Dakota, for example, there's a lot of space out there and a lot of potholes and a lot of places that birds can go. If you get a hunt identified and then nobody's out scouting the next day, you better hope that field can produce 2 days in a row for you, or you're going to be out of luck the next morning. So you always have to be, thinking forward, and somebody's got to sacrifice and get out there for the next hunt, and then somebody else rotate out. Because I can assure you, if someone's not putting in the time to do the scouting necessary, it's gonna, it's not going to be fun for anybody just to get all set up and then, lay in the field all morning and not do any good. So, definitely something to consider, especially when you're away from home and you're hunting unfamiliar areas. Somebody's got to bite the bullet and get out there and, put the mileage on to find where the birds are.
Yeah. And that makes me think about the hunting shows that I watch on like the Outdoor Channel, and the guys that go to, I don't want to say high fence, but even just guided hunts, say deer hunts, they go and it's been scouted all year long. They've had the cameras up, but I enjoy watching the ones that, they're not the huge professionals yet, and they have to, I don't know if they have to, but they hunt public land, or they go out and they do their own thing. The first thing that they do is go and set up trail cameras. So that point right there, you have to put a little bit of work in if you want to be successful. If you're just going in blind, it's not going to work out for you. And those guys, I mean, a lot of those shows they're on the Outdoor Channel, so they've done it right, and that just, that proves your point right there.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows that waterfowl hunting is labor intensive, and it takes a lot of time, money, effort to have successful hunts on a consistent basis. Scouting is probably the most critical part of that entire piece. because you can have all of the top of the line decoys and calls and blinds and trailers and all that kind of stuff. But if you don't have any birds to hunt, you're really not, you're really kind of wasting your time and your money with all that stuff. So, we're going to post all of this scouting information on our website. We'll have show notes on the episode 10 podcast page on our website, where we'll have a lot of these notes up there, so you can take a look at these and see what you guys do and what you can add to maybe help you a little bit while you're out on the road. And like we've said with some of the other stuff, if you've got a tip about things you like to do when scouting, or something that you feel you could add to the discussion, shoot us an email, hit us on Facebook, Twitter, call into our hotline. We love hearing from guys on that. 724-609-FOWL, 724-609-3695. And again, we'll have all this information up on our website for everybody to check out. So before we move on, Dan, anything else about scouting that you think is important that we should point out?
No, I think we hit a lot of the main points, and, got specific in a few areas that, people were emailing and asking about. So I think we covered it pretty well. There's always more tips to be had. So, like you said, if anyone has any other tips that we missed, make sure you get it to us, because we plan on being on the show for a long time. And I'm sure that we're going to be talking about scouting again, since we talk about it just about every episode. So, stay active with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah. And the thing is too, when we have these discussions, these are just things that we use and tips that we think are beneficial and helpful for people. But by no means do we think that this is a complete list or the only way to do things. So we're always interested to hear how guys, how they do their scouting. If you're hunting primarily flooded timber, what's the best way to go about scouting that? All that kind of stuff. We'd love to hear from you guys. So please, let us know how you go about that stuff, and we can, always share that with everybody else in the show. But I think at this point, it's time for us to transition into our parting shot. So this week, the parting shot isn't really anything too planned or scripted here, but I just wanted to take a moment just to sort of remind everybody that Tuesday, November 4th, is Election Day, and it's an important day in this country for a lot of different reasons. But it's truly your opportunity to get out and make an impact on your local and your state level elected officials. There's a lot of things going on today in Capitol Hill and bureaucracy and all that kind of stuff that has an impact on us as hunters and outdoorsmen. And early in the show, in the first episode, we talked about the Farm Bill and the money that's allocated to conservation and things of that nature that benefit all of us hunters. So please take advantage of the right as a citizen of this country to get out and make your voice heard. Honestly, if you're not out there putting your vote in, you don't really have a leg to stand on if you have any grievances or issues with the way the country's being run. So, we're not here to push political parties. All we're advocating is that everybody get out and exercise your right to vote, and vote for the change if you feel that you need it to happen. So again, November 4th, Election Day. That's going to do it for episode 10 of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed the discussion on hunting applications and our in-depth look at scouting. You'll be able to check out all the show notes at hpoutdoors.com, and you can also check out all of the podcast episodes on iTunes. If you enjoy what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. We absolutely appreciate that. And continue the conversation with us on Facebook, Twitter, and email info@hpoutdoors.com. So until next time, for Dan, I'm Josh. Take care.